Good morning and welcome from Hahngasse in Vienna. Alsergrund, my name is Sebastian Schäfer. I'm the director of the Institute for the Danube region in Central Europe. And today I have the pleasure to talk to Austria's leading Poland experts, which also happens to be my colleague, Malwina Talik. But as you obviously are seeing, she's not in the room with me, but joining us from her well-deserved holiday for that IDMonSite special edition on Poland. Malwina, thank you for joining us despite you being away.
Good morning, Sebastian. My pleasure, always at IDM's service.
Actually, Malwina is joining IDM already 5 years ago, and the first thing she ever did was record a short insights on the presidential Polish election back then. So it's a nice circle that we're coming here together. I didn't think back then that I would be so involved in Polish politics, but Malwina convinced me otherwise. And yeah, it's a pleasure to have the possibility to talk about an election that was on the knife edge and where the results basically are only certain since a couple of hours. Quick housekeeping rules. This will be a very short IDMonSite for obvious reasons, because we don't want Malwina to keep her too long. So I will ask a couple of questions, and then there is of course also the possibility to either raise your hand if you're joining us here at the Zoom webinar. I see a couple of people are here. But you can also ask some questions in the YouTube chat, and I will try to pick them up if they're necessary. A few words on Malwina's background. She has studied, amongst others, in Vienna, but also in Leipzig, Germany. She has worked for the Polish embassy. She has worked for the Polish for the Polish Academy of Sciences in Vienna. So has been working on issues that we are going to talk about for a substantial amount of time, and is regularly commenting in various Austrian, but also especially in regional media that the IDM is dealing with on what is happening in Poland. And therefore, my first question, of course, is, Malwina, what is happening in Poland? How did it come to this result? How did it end up like this? Because I remember what you said in our Sure Fix after the first round, where you said, like, it's almost impossible for Trzaskowski to win. You turned out to be right, but it was very narrow. Give us an update, please.
Yes, Sebastian, I'm a Central European, so we tend to see things very negatively. So probably that's why I reacted this way. But my reaction was also based on the results of the first round, because then actually, contrary to the polls, it turned out that the candidates of the populist and far-right parties performed much stronger than expected, which meant nothing changed on the first two positions. It was liberal conservative Trzaskowski and right-wing conservative Nawrocki, but places from 3 to 4 were actually quite decisive. Together, candidates from those more radical parties got 20%, and this was absolutely not expected. And if we did simple maths, then it was obvious that if their votes go to Nawrocki, then he has more than 50%. This is why they reacted this way. And what we saw actually mostly late last evening and this morning pretty much confirmed this prediction. So the first result yesterday were positive for Trzaskowski, but just by a narrow margin. So he seemed to be the winner. But it was just a difference of 100,000 to 100,000 votes. Already the late polls showed that Nawrocki was actually leading. And today at around 7 a.m. we had the result from the official result that it is indeed Nawrocki. It was what is worth emphasizing here. The turnout was very high. as for Poland. It was one of the highest. It was over 71%. There were a lot of voters also abroad. So the turnout there was for 84% this time, but there were almost 700,000 people who said that they would like to vote there. So there's a lot of mobilization on both sides, on the sides of both candidates for voting. When we look at voter profiles of what we know so far, who voted for who, then Nawrocki won among young people. I mean, when I say young, I mean the two youngest voters groups, which are between 18 and 29 years of age, and 30 and 39. The difference, interestingly enough, was smaller among pensioners. So Nawrocki won there, but only by a small margin. And this is very different to previous elections, because 5 years ago, when Trzaskowski ran for the first time, he was actually the one winning among the youngest. So this is a change. Nawrocki won among men, Trzaskowski among women. This has also probably to do with the stance on, for example, the abortion law, which is currently enforced in Poland. And there's also a divide, that's a very typical divide between East and West. So in Western regions, it was rather Trzaskowski. In Eastern regions, it was Nawrocki. Also in smaller towns, it was Nawrocki, whereas Trzaskowski dominated in big cities. What is also interesting is that the scenario reminds, or what happened now reminds a bit of what happened 10 years ago. This is when Andrzej Duda won. And Andrzej Duda was actually not, back then, not favored to win by the polls for most of the time. It was just shortly before the first round that some polls started indicating that he might actually win. And indeed he did. And this time, the same happened to Trzaskowski. This was what many were warning against, of not being too confident, because although he was leading all this time in the polls, he eventually lost really very much in the last minute to Nawrocki.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for this first insights into it. I mean, the numbers are very fresh, and of course there will be probably more analysis also done by you in the course of how that result unfolds. But nevertheless, I mean, you mentioned already some reasons for Nawrocki's victory. I'm wondering, I mean, you described a very clear pattern that we could see also in other elections, be it presidential or parliamentary in our region, which means that the considered to be far-right candidate gets more support with males, but also with younger people. He, in the overall campaign, made quite some substantial mistakes. There were some things uncovered, that he got a flat from a pensioner under dubious circumstances, that he was a football hooligan, and is this not something that would disqualify him among them? Is this actually a reason why they vote for him? Why did that not have a bigger effect? Other questions, why did he win?
That's a good question. And as you mentioned, there will be analysis coming up probably and trying to explain it. It's difficult to explain it in one short answer. I would be careful of calling him far right. I don't find that Nawrocki, at least at this stage, can be considered far right. He's definitely right wing, conservative, populist to some extent. He hasn't been in politics before, really. So we will learn a lot about him still. Nevertheless, he was very close to institutions which are very important to the policies of law and justice, because he was director of the Institute of National Remembrance, and he was director, or still is actually, of the Museum of the Second World War. Both institutions very crucial for the politics of remembrance of the law and justice. But to your question now, after this brief background, yes, there have been very many scandals uncovered over time. And some of them are also considered a crime or could be considered a crime. What also was uncovered just recently, has been rumored for a long time, but has been to some extent confirmed by investigative journalists, is that as a student, even a PhD student, so an ambitious young man, he was also working as a security guard in one of the hotels at the Polish coast. And there he apparently was somehow involved in procuring, so like bringing also prostitutes to the hotel. And this also links him slightly, maybe even more than slightly, to local, criminal groups who were in charge of it. So there are lots of question marks there. One thing about why his voters weren't scared off by that is that the question is what they watch. And the media that they watch did not explain that much in detail. And the other media that did are not considered as reliable by the voters of Law and Justice. And there was also this nice myth that he maybe managed to create, that in the past he did mistakes. But, after all, he did his PhD in history. He became director of 2 important institutions. So to many, it is an example of almost of a self-made man with maybe a bit tainted past, but look, he actually turned out well, or so you would think. And the case of the pensioner is more recent, and there are also more details to that, because this pensioner also happened to be a sex offender and his neighbor. And Nawrocki was aware of that, and nevertheless was visiting him in prison, apparently signed this contract to get the apartment and take care of this man until his death. Then he didn't do that. Nevertheless, because Trzaskowski used this very much against Nawrocki in the campaign, but I had the impression that he almost overused it, that it became boring at some point, that it seemed like Trzaskowski had nothing more to offer than attacks on Nawrocki about his flat and other things. So all in all, it seemed that it actually worked out to his advantage. What I can also add to why I believe that he might have won is he managed to get the votes from those far-right parties or radical parties. What happened in between the 2 rounds is that one of those far-right candidates invited both Nawrocki and Trzaskowski to his YouTube channel to talk with them and to say, like, look, if you want my voters, here are the conditions. Here is what I believe in. Would you agree? There were conditions like Poland should never join the Eurozone, which, to be honest, both candidates agreed on, or agreed like not in the nearest future. There was a question about Ukraine's accession to NATO and the EU, and here there was a stark difference. So Trzaskowski sees Ukraine's future in the EU and in NATO. Nawrocki, not necessarily. So this president might not be a good person for you in general for Ukraine in the future, or at least in this one regard. And there were also questions about Green Deal and so on and so forth. Nawrocki signed this declaration that he agreed with all the points that were there. Trzaskowski said, no, I disagree with many, but I agree with some. And you see, we can talk, even we have different views, we can talk. Nevertheless, what we know, at least for now, is that most voters from Mentzen, so from this right-wing populist, went to Nawrocki. For voters of Law and Justice, I also find that this was the moment of a bit of a revenge for the last elections, where PiS actually won but didn't manage to create a government. PiS itself presented it as a referendum on how the current government is doing. So, a way to show the frustration. Here I also have to say that Nawrocki officially was not candidate of PiS, but supported by PiS. This is a slight but important difference, because he was the so-called civic candidate, independent, and this in many debates gave him the freedom to say, okay, look, you attack me for something that Law and Justice did, but I'm not from Law and Justice. I wasn't there, but look at Trzaskowski. He is actually an active politician from Civic Coalition. He's actually the right hand of Tusk, I'm not, you know. Also, Nawrocki criticized peace a couple of times. Like he said, I didn't agree with COVID restrictions, you know. It's easy for me to say that because, you know, I wasn't in power back then. I wasn't a politician, but I didn't like it. I didn't like this and that. And he mentioned many things. And I think this resonated very well with some parts of the electorate. And maybe just small things, more symbolic. I don't think that it had huge impact on voters, but he managed to meet with Trump. It might have been important for the voters in the US, but they are usually more conservative than those in Poland or elsewhere among Polish diaspora. But they're also Nawrocki won. And he had George Simeon on his side as well. We've seen actually that those candidates from both countries were supporting each other. Dan was supporting Trzaskowski and even came to Warsaw recently. And Simeon was there in Poland yesterday supporting Nawrocki. So I think that this is more of a symbolic importance, but was also a way of supporting the candidate.
Thank you. Well, I mean, to me, it sounds a little bit similar to actually how Trump became president, branding himself as someone outside of the system, not responsible for what is happening, but nevertheless, of course, closely aligning with the policies of the Republicans, or in this case, with peace. And here and then we see, I mean, at least they come from the same party family as they share this part of say, Euroscepticism. Was that actually not something that brought Tusk into government? And how did Trzaskowski not be able to ride that wave, so to say, to exploit that, look, you need us to implement reforms that are necessary because that has been blocked? Or, simple question again, why did Trzaskowski lose? What were his mistakes?
That's a very good point, Sebastian. And I find that this has not been emphasized enough in the campaign, neither before or just very, very late now. So the fact that there is a lot at stake, that the reforms cannot be continued if president is from Law and Justice, because in Poland, president is more of a representative function, but president can veto bills. And President Andrzej Duda has already done it, but also Nawrocki said quite clearly he will also be blocking that. He also, even today, if I believe, or in the recent days, mentioned that to him, Tusk and his government represents evil, right? Like that what they do is just not right for Poland. So we can expect even more of this blockage. I don't know. I find this is a lost chance, and they didn't manage to recreate this momentum that was there before parliamentary elections, when also the turnout was higher. When it comes to Trzaskowski, I think, especially before the first round, he just did not seem like Trzaskowski. He did not work that authentically as before. The reason might be that he was trying to address, more conservative voters. And Trzaskowski is conservative, but liberal conservative. And there were many things that he said that didn't sound like him, many topics that he was trying to avoid. There was one statement also about not giving maybe this Kindergelder, so money for children, to Ukrainians if they don't meet certain conditions. And this was not definitely Trzaskowski style. He was sort of distancing himself a little bit from the LGBTQI community, not completely, but just like he was not bringing this topic much. And there was even a situation, one debate, where Nawrocki put a rainbow flag, in front of Trzaskowski and said, yeah, this is what he represents, he will sexualize our children and so on and so forth. And what I consider Trzaskowski's mistake was to hide it. And then the candidate from the left party, she said, like, give it to me because I'm not ashamed of this flag. And I find this was also a symbolic but very important moment for many people, also young people, that he just does not stand for his values, that he also says something else that he used to. That was a very common accusation of him. I think that it was important to convince the undecided or voters who are not from those two, or not supporters of those two big parties. Because in Poland, for like good 20 years now, we have those two camps of Law and Justice and Civic Coalition. And the trick would be to convince those who are voters of others, and this is what he didn't manage to do. And as you see, young people, this is a huge riddle. What happened there? Why are young people turning their backs actually on Trzaskowski? Is it because of those changing views, or there is something else that they need? If I may have a small teaser concerning EU, there's a project that we have been running at the IDM, and we have been also conducting a survey for a while among young people. And it seems that what they identify as a challenge, as lack of affordable housing, are lower salaries. And it seems that this is also what played a part in this election. And it was not addressed that much as by the two major candidates. It was addressed by the left-wing candidates. But the two main candidates, I didn't find the much offer for young people, for example. So, yeah.
So that, for me, it sounds a little bit again like the US election, because it seems that, I mean, it's probably too early to comment on this based on data. But what I learned when I was talking with also friends from the US, they said, like, okay, if you don't give us a proper candidate that is taking care of these needs that we have, and I think like stagnating wages, high costs of living, unaffordable housing, etc., is unfortunately something that is a very global problem, especially in recent years. They said, okay, if you don't give us a candidate that addresses these issues, then we're just not going to go to vote, or even in the extreme case, then we're going to go and vote for the extremist candidate. And this is how Trump benefited. Would that also be a reason why Nawrocki benefited, or is that something that didn't determine the electoral result? And maybe you can here also comment, because I mean it's a very small margin for a country of 40 plus million inhabitants, with what's it now, 300,000 votes that decided that. The electoral system per se, is that also maybe a hindrance? Because again, that was also something that we could see in the US election.
I would say maybe we'll start with the last question with the system. I mean, as such, it's not perfect, of course. Where I see room for improvement is definitely voting out of the place of living. I mean, Poland has many possibilities, such as voting abroad. There are very many polling stations abroad, or it's quite relatively easy to vote in other places in Poland, but nevertheless, it's still not always possible for everyone to determine where they will be that day, really. I mean, people are very mobile these days, and polls, I would say, really highly. So a simple solution, even like in Austria, or I believe in Germany, to be able to have a postal vote would definitely be helpful, and may also increase the turnout. Coming back to your previous question about bread and butter issues, I think so. I think so, because there is a big disappointment about the current government. And this might be also an answer for your previous question. This is what Trzaskowski, in a way, was being punished for, because he is from the Civic Coalition. He is seen as someone very close to Tusk. And there is this widespread feeling that this government does not deliver. Of course, it does not deliver also because of the president, who can block a lot. But people want results and they want them fast. So some of them might have been disappointed and turned away. And also to many, it's very abstract to understand what is happening with the judicial system and so on and so forth. They want, the change of their everyday life. And we cannot blame people for that, because if something is unaffordable, this will be the priority and not what's happening in the Constitutional Tribunal. So, but I think eventually it could have really played to the advantage of Nawrocki. So this disappointment with the government and those bread and butter issues. I believe you had also a question in between, but I forgot.
No, it was. I'm comparing a lot to the U.S. Presidential election here, because I've got the feeling that there are some parallels, but I also would like to, see differences maybe here. So the point was that, of course, some are disappointed and then they don't go to vote, which of course affects, but others might even go into a different direction, and then support the candidate that is not standing for this. Or even the more radical, so to say, candidate, just to stick it to the system. Because if you're not listening to us, then we might as well burn down the overall system. But following up on this, I would also like to ask, I mean, if we look at this now, the more or less campaigning of PiS turned out to be very successful, in the sense that we just need to block, and then we will be rewarded for this. Why is it so complicated to actually explain that? And how did they not exploit that situation? I mean, there was another attempt to recreate this March of a Million Hearts. There was some sort of attempt to recreate that spirit, but obviously it was not good enough. And here I would also be, of course, interested in your evaluation, how you see this. And I mentioned again, there is a possibility to also ask questions here in the chat, raise your hand, or post it on YouTube if you want to.
Maybe one explanation as well. There is a certain feeling of being tired of this duopol, as we call it in Polish. Duo, so peace and chaos, Civic Coalition and Law and Justice. That there is the election is always about those two political forces fighting against each other, and people are just very often tired of it because they don't really align with each, and they look for the other options in between. And I think that at some time in the future it will come. The question is also what it will be: more left-wing parties or more radical right parties. And I think especially for young people, they are very often a bit still lost. And we saw it in the first round that they were actually voting in favor of the two most candidates to extremes of the political scene. If they were deciding about elections, then in the second round you would have Mentzen from the sort of radical guy, and then Zandberg, so the left wing. But it's not young people deciding about everything yet. And I wouldn't say that was completely a protest vote, because that was what I've heard a lot. I think it's in the second round, it was also very much about just being disappointed with what is going on and some need for change. And maybe people believe that with this result, the change will come. Sorry, question once again.
The need to maybe explain better that what's the result for, what does it mean for the political system, and adding to it, maybe what do you think will it mean actually for the Tusk government in the future now? Will they be able to continue this cohabitation until the end of the regular term of the prime minister, or do you expect early elections now?
As for Tusk, and also, they heard previously the question about the marches, and I attempt to recreate this. Yes, there was a march before the second round, and it was actually successful. It seems that there were very many people there. I find it came simply probably way too late, and maybe there would be a need for another march before. But also Nawrocki organized and Law and Justice organized a march in Warsaw, so very same city, different place, and very same time. And although there were fewer people there, Warsaw and big cities are usually strongholds of Trzaskowski, so no surprise that people came. But there was also this fight of two marches there. I don't think it's always that easy to explain how political system works to people, and I don't think that that they always, at least there has not been a very convincing way that the government has done it so far, and it's a bit of a pity because, as I said, I think they have many strong, good arguments, and they could make it more about defending democracy, keeping the pro-European course, but somehow this was not that much accentuated. Neither was the abortion law, unless it was, addressed by moderators in debates. What it means for Tusk government, well, does not look rosy. And at least before our meeting here, I haven't heard any reaction from Tusk. It means, in the best case, continuation of what we have seen in the past year and a half. So the government cannot really bring much through of those most substantial reforms on judicial system, because it will be blocked by the president. And I think Nawrocki will be trying to lead to earlier elections by making the government dysfunctional. And this could mean maybe not necessarily the victory of peace, because I think in the last polls, Civic Coalition was slightly stronger. But again, those more radical parties, right-wing populist parties, are gaining a lot of support. So the future government can also have someone, a minister from Confederacja. So I expect this was going to happen. Yeah.
Early elections on the table?
Yeah, I wouldn't rule it out. I think in the moment, maybe not yet, but after a couple of months, who knows? If everything is being blocked, we may have early elections next year. I wouldn't completely rule it out. Nawrocki will start his term in August. So there's still a little bit of time, but Duda has the same stance as he does. So
is Trzaskowski a success? I mean, he's still stay mayor of Warsaw. Will he continue, or is he someone who could even step in for Tusk? Because I mean, he's now lost 2 presidential elections. Also, if we look to other countries, if you're unsuccessful in 1 or 2 elections, even if it's only within a party, you can still become chancellor.
Well, I think for the time being, he will remain the mayor of Warsaw, which still is a very important position within the country. It's the capital. It's a very big city, and it's also a lot of impact. And I think that he has been successful mayor because otherwise he wouldn't have been re-elected. So I believe this is what concerns his future for now. But I haven't heard any updates yet. If he can replace Tusk one day, that's a tough question. I mean, I think there's also Radek Sikorski there, who, by the way, also want to run in presidential elections, but he lost internal elections within the Civic Coalition to Rafał Trzaskowski. So I think that there are more contenders for this position there, and I don't think that Tusk is going anywhere. I'm not right now.
Right.
I mean, he's not very popular. He's popular in his party. He's definitely also the one who managed to revive Civic Coalition. But he's not necessarily very popular among the Poles. I think that even slightly more than half of the Polish population is not really fond of Tusk. This is partially to do with the previous government, so we're talking about 10 years ago, but it has also to do with what Law and Justice and all the false information to a large extent that they spread about him as being, spy of foreign powers. He's actually a German agent, and so on and so forth. I mean, I think this really resonates among certain parts of the society very strong.
Yeah. So what will it mean now for the region? What can we expect for the Polish policies to the neighboring countries here, especially also. I mean, you mentioned that some of the demands from the, in this case, really far-right candidates were that Ukraine should not join NATO and the European Union. What will it mean for regional security, but also European integration, and in general, the stance of Poland, which was very pro-European in the last couple of months? Will we see a turn here?
I believe that paradoxically there will not be that much change, because in many ways Duda and Nawrocki may share similar views. I think not on Ukraine. That's the difference. But again, when it comes to security, I think there is a unanimity in Poland about it. So there are not really strong pro-Russian sentiments. I think that there is an awareness that a future of Ukraine is very important for a future of Poland. So I believe there will be a support. There is no way of like Poland now abandoning Ukraine. It's just that the tone might be very different. And as Nawrocki said, that he will not be fond of Ukraine joining NATO. But this is, we'll see what the future will bring. He was also trying to convince Konfederacja voters who have this certain anti-Ukrainian sentiment. So that might also be the reason. When it comes to the EU, I also expect harsher tones, but even then, it's not a completely anti-European stance. There's a lot of criticism of the EU, but I don't see that Nawrocki would be, or even Law and Justice at this moment, at least, a political force that wants Poland out of the EU, for example. Which does not mean that they will make things for the EU easier. Nawrocki himself positioned himself very strongly as a transatlantist. So for him, the relation with the US and with President Trump is crucial, much more than the one in the EU. So that may be a little bit, of course, of a challenge, but we'll see closer soon.
So we're coming to the end. One thing that has also been mentioned in a discussion that I see here now is that what is the role, what would you see, and especially with regards to what we have been working on at IDM together recently, do you see some sort of foreign interference in this election, especially from the Russian Federation? Is this something that might have tipped the scale? Is there anything that you could see in this direction and want to comment on it?
I think that we'll see that in the future when we know most. Of course, the Russian disinformation is very active in the whole of the EU, also in Poland. I'm not sure if they might have tipped the scale. The Russian disinformation in Poland was also mostly about anti-Ukrainian narratives, trying to instill some fears about increasing social polarization, and Poland is a very polarized country. And I'm sure this result is to the advantage of Russian Federation, but I can't say with certainty that the result is only because of, or the result is an outcome of Russian disinformation. I think there is much more to it, and whether some agree with the result or not, Nawrocki was elected democratically. I think the election was fair, and he has a huge mandate and a huge support of more than 10 million Poles. And we can also not forget these people. We cannot forget that this is a state-conscious choice. And I think the challenge for the government, or also a challenge or a task for politicians in the future, is how to, decrease the polarization, how to learn to talk to each other, not to get offended at each other. Voters of Nawrocki or Law and Justice are very often disregarded, as less educated, as those who don't know politics. Well, it is true that people who are less educated tend to vote for law and justice. It's still not a reason to treat them in a way worse. So I think it is really crucial, I think not only in Poland, but also in many countries of the region, to be able to have this dialogue across the society much more if we want to see a change and we don't want radical voices coming to force.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. I think that's a very concise summary, and yeah, we will see that of course any blockage of progress, especially when it comes to working together within the European Union, but especially also within Central and Eastern Europe, the Danube region, will benefit the Kremlin. We have learned from Malvina that this was a election that followed certain patterns. We could see that young people have been voting, especially for left-wing and right-wing extremist positions, also something that we've, for instance, seen in the parliamentary elections in Germany. So there are certain patterns that we can see. Malvina also mentioned now, just at the end, the trope that we always follow and say, like, okay, if the person that is probably less beneficial for democratic development and has some extremist positions or right-wing positions, we rely on the fact that they are supported by mainly less educated people, but this is not something that will help us defend democracy. So I take from our very early and quick analysis that 2 weeks ago we found a victory of the pro-European and democratic Romanian presidential candidate. Now we see a different election, which is, of course, for us a task to continue the debate, to continue to talk about this. And this is something that we at IDM do each and every day. Thank you very much, Malvina, that you took the time to talk with us despite you being on holiday. I hope you can enjoy the rest of the holiday, although you might get the one or the other question in this regard. If you want to support what the IDM is doing, follow us on social media, IDM Vienna, subscribe to our newsletter, but even more important, consider becoming a member or buy us a coffee. You find everything that you need to know on our website, www.idm.at. Thank you very much to everyone who is joining in this webinar, and also the ones on YouTube. The video is available afterwards for you to rewatch. Thank you very much, and until next time. Thank you, Malvina.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. So.